resisting Russian inroad into Dagestan, where he lived, a part of Russia now. So I'm going to try to, ask questions about the work itself, the themes inside, and writing in general. And I hope it ends up being a conversation that enlightens and enriches this festival. If you can, please put your phones on silent, and let's follow along. So thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
I tried not to spend too much time watching the first session you had in the morning, so that I don't get too familiar. So if I ask any questions that you have answered before, feel free to let me know. How has your experiencing Nigeria been this time? This is your first time in the country? How
yes,
has it been?
This is the first time in Nigeria, and I'm enjoying it very, very much. Of course, I have a love for Nigeria from the time I was reading Buchi Emechita and reading all the other Nigerian writers. And somehow, when you do read literature from a certain country, you start after a while to feel that you know it. It becomes familiar to you. And so I was quite excited to come, and I'm quite happy to be here.
What part of Nigeria surprised you the most, comparing it to what you have read from outside?
Well, of course, I haven't read about the Muslim North that much. I mean, the only book I read was Nathan John's Born on a Tuesday and The Season of Crimson Blossoms. But what struck me, of course, about Kaduna is it reminded me a great deal of Sudan. I felt, that it did have a familiar feel. I felt quite at home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please, if you can, please give us some silence so that we can follow the conversation. Thank you.
Well, I wanted to write it for quite some time. It took me time to gather up the confidence to start writing about it, and I actually wanted to write it immediately after Minaret, but then I backed out and I went and wrote Lyrics Alley first. Then I went back. Then I came to it, and in a way, it is my response to the events of 9/11. It's my response to the terrorism that's happening in the name of Islam. And you can, of course, tackle this subject from very different angles. But the way I chose to tackle it was to tell the story of Imam Shamil, who fought a jihad against imperial Russian expansion in the 19th century. And to balance that with a story that's happening in contemporary times in the UK of a young man who's arrested on terrorism charges. And so if you have the story going backwards and forwards in time, in the present and in the past. So it had a lot of research and a lot of angles to it, but the important part is to create a distance between the concept of jihad as self-defense, as was practiced by Imam Shamil, and with the violence that's happening now, attacking civilians, and indiscriminately killing Muslims, non-Muslims, and the chaos that is happening now. Is just to create a distance. And I think that as Muslims, we're not really educated well enough. We're taught about the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as being idealistic, as being the best time. And then we are taught that we are now in the contemporary time trying to be like that time. And denying all the history that is in between. But of course, so many centuries have passed and so many Muslims have lived, and they have also dealt with the problems that we are dealing with now. And so I wanted to show this example. And the other thing that was important for me was the fact that this jihad that Imam Shamil fought had an end. He did eventually surrender. Yeah. He didn't blow himself up and all that's happening. So these were the things that I wanted to highlight. Yeah.
Thank you. And you did successfully. But before I take you up on that, I wanted to ask, did you always know the form the novel was going to take? I think I read an interview you gave while you were writing the book, and the description you gave of it was something about a book that happened in contemporary times. I mean, when I finished reading the book, I compared it to the description you gave at the time. It seems that maybe at some point you decided on a different way of telling the same story. Was there any particular change that happened while you're writing, or did you always know that it was going to be this form?
Well, it started with being the historical novel, but then I felt that it's difficult. How can the modern reader suddenly pick up a book and start to read about jihad without engaging with what's happening now, you know? And I thought that that would be wouldn't be like evading the problem, or wouldn't sound right. So therefore I introduced this modern character who's a historian. Her name is Natasha, and she's half Sudanese, half Russian, and she's the one who's researching the story of Imam Shamil. And so in a way she acts as a bridge for us, for the modern reader, between what is happening nowadays and what has happened in the past. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Also, there was the way you interpreted the Shamil story. It was interesting for me because I hadn't heard about him before, and it made me go ahead and research, and I realized the number of parallels between the real historical person and the person you created in the plot. Were there any significant differences that you made, particularly because it's fiction, of course. You wanted to be as true to history as possible. And what were those, and how did you decide which ones they were going to be?
I was more or less very true to the historical fact. But what I did, of course, was I focused on on the dramatic part of his life, when his son, who's 8 years old, gets kidnapped by the Russians, and he's taken away to St. Petersburg, and he becomes a godson for the Tsar. And so Imam Shamil feels humiliated by this. You know, there he is, he's a Muslim leader, he's an imam, and his son is being brought up, you know, by the infidels. And then, so he kidnaps a Russian princess in order to exchange her for his son. And when this happens, we then take the story. I take the story from the point of the princess, and how she is being kidnapped, and how she's dragged up the mountains to stay with Imam Shamil, and also the point of view of Jamal al-Din, who's the son, who feels obliged to return back in order that the princess is released. But he has conflicting feelings. Of course, he loves his family, but he's grown up now in Russia. He's modern. He's an officer in the Russian army. He likes to dance. He likes to skate. And for him, it's such a step backwards to go to the village. So I liked very much engaging with this young man and the conflict that he was in. So these were specific things that I focused on.
So in the real life story, was the 8-year-old son actually given to the Russian?
Yes, this is all true. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So he eventually, when he surrendered, he went to live in Russia.
Imam Shamil,
yes. Eventually, and then he went to Saudi Arabia when he died.
He went to Saudi Arabia.
The idea of the title of the story comes from so many layers of events that happen when people get to live, sometimes as captives, in some other person's custody. So the son was kidnapped. He grew up. He started loving Russia. He wanted to marry a Russian. It was denied. He also grew to love the Tsar.
Yeah.
And then he kidnaps, Imam Shamil kidnaps Anna, who is a Georgian princess, and who was also in some way a captive of Russia because Georgia was also taken over. So you try to look at the idea of people living in captivity under some other person's rules and regulations and stuff. How do you think that affects the present? Is there anything you want us to learn from the way people are treated when they are in some other person's, under some other person's authority or so?
I think I was really showing the home, the fact that everybody is not at home. If you look at the whole novel,
yes.
Natasha is never at home.
Yes.
She's either in somebody else's house, or her house has been burgled. Imam Shamil loses, the whole village is razed to the ground and they have to move. So there's a constant feeling of homelessness that's carried along with throughout the novel. Nobody feels at home, nobody feels settled at home, and so that was the idea that I was carrying along between the two time periods. Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask about the work that went into the book, the research that must have happened to be able to find the kinds of food they ate, the kinds of clothes they wore, the difference between a kinjal and a scimitar and a dagger and all of that. And you made me learn a number of new things. How long did it take you to write that, and what was the process like?
Well, of course, the research is hard work, but if you're interested, you find yourself, it doesn't feel like hard work, because you want to, I mean, as a writer, you want to know, and you want to get the details, the more, detailed the things you're reading, the better for you. So I also researched both sides. I mean, I was reading sources that were written by the Russians, and then sources that were written from the Muslims' point of view. And of course, there's difference. Then it's beautiful to come across a particular scene, for example, and then read it from the point of view of the Russians, and then read it from the point of view of the Imam Shamil's people. And one of the things that struck me, of course, was that the Russians would describe him as being, he's very crafty, he's very, like a fox, he's clever and all that. And then when he's writing from his point of view, he was actually frightened of the Russians, because the Russians had the big guns. The Russians were the ones who were powerful, and they were using these, powerful weapons against his people. So he was afraid of them, despite, his ability to keep them. For 30 years he was able to resist them, but still he had a fear of them. So that was interesting. Another source that was interesting was, and I came across it actually in the middle of the writing, and I had to go back and change some things and add some things, was that the princess herself, when she was released, she gave an interview to a journalist, and detailed exactly what she saw in Shamil's household. And this was for the first time the world then caught a glimpse of this private life of this man who's been, giving the Russians such a hard time. And this was a document that was published during, immediately after a year after she was released. So it was, when I came across it translated into English, and it was, of course, it was like a primary source, and I got all the details of exactly what they were eating, what they were doing, what they were saying. Of course, when in real life, it wasn't only the princess that was kidnapped. It was her whole family. They were her and her sisters and many children and many servants and her sister-in-law and a whole, family. But when I came to write the book, I thought I can't deal with all these different characters, so I compounded them into fewer characters, and that made it easier for me to focus on the characters. Yeah.
Thank you. So, what has been the response for people who have read it? People to whom the story is important, Muslims, people in Russia, or people who knew about the story, and where have you got the most interesting response from the readers?
I think most readers said they preferred the past rather than the present. They felt that the past was the exciting. It was interesting. It was an exciting story. Whereas the present, it slows down a little bit, because we get into the character of Natasha, and she's just an ordinary person. And I was actually wanting to have this difference, the sort of normal, boring life of the historian, and then the exciting, action-packed, back and forth. So people responded to that. The reviews in the United States were actually very positive. I felt they really, responded very positively to maybe more than the British press. Of course, the part of it which deals with the young man being arrested for terrorism is quite a sensitive subject now in the United Kingdom, because there's a strategy now called Prevent, where teachers are kind of meant to identify, report on the students who they feel are vulnerable to radicalization. And this is a debatable subject. Yeah. So.
I also like the way you wrote made it easy to walk in the shoes of every character. So you could relate with Natasha and the dilemma she had reporting us, to the authorities, because she knew him and she understood that he wasn't a bad person, and he wasn't a radical, But she was also not sure as well, because she knew that he had motivation, and what is tendency to be radicalized? How do you define that exactly?
Yes.
And we understood everybody's perspective, and that's what good literature does. I'm interested in finding out from you, for instance, about what jihad. How do you? Well, it's a word now that's a little polarizing. In the book, you express it as, you even allowed a moment of debate when Oz himself said in the past things were black and white. You could say the Russians were trying to take the land and this guy tried to resist. But in the modern, we don't really see that way there. It's sometimes not even land, it's just political activism. And just, I think it was yesterday, there was a United States activist, I think Linda Sarsour or something, who said that people should resist Donald Trump's, the attitude of his government, which is oppressive.
Yeah.
And he's not saying blow up things, she's not saying that. She's just saying resist it and stand up for the values you believe in. So what is jihad, and what has it meant to you as a person and as an author?
Well, it means struggle. It means struggle, that we struggle, in a spiritual kind of way as well. This is another meaning of it, that we struggle against our own weaknesses, against our own, lack of control, that there is an internal struggle that goes on. And that is also important, and that also the book shows that as well, that this concept of jihad can also be seen as an internal struggle, and not just the physical fight, the way that they're fighting. But history has shown the way the Russians behaved then and towards the Muslim minorities over history. It shows that their intention was really to to wipe out Islam from Russia itself, and so he was really fighting a jihad, Imam Shamil, because afterwards it became even forbidden to fight to practice Islam, And
after he was captured.
After he was captured, after that, then after came the Russian Revolution and all that, and it became more and more difficult for the Muslims in Russia. I mean, the Muslims who are really suffering the most now in the world are the ones in China, but nobody really sees it in that way. It's not politicized. But from an Islamic point of view, they're the ones who are unable to practice Islam, or that the government interferes with their practice of Islam. They're not allowed to go on pilgrimage, for example. They're not allowed, to name their children Muslim names. There's a lot of, true oppression in China, but it's not really, people are not aware of that, yeah.
And also personally, I think you mentioned once that you started wearing the hijab only after you went to the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
And that was also interesting to me, because it shows that you were, the personal, was more important than the society, not the construct of society. And I think you've also mentioned that you think spirituality is something, you want to portray it as an individual thing, and there could be Muslims who are not, you could be a bad Muslim, but you're still a Muslim, and you're still able to practice that faith. Do you think the book has been able to show that side more effectively?
I think this is something that would come across in all of my writing, and this is a constant theme. The reason I didn't wear hijab in Sudan, even though I toyed with the idea, was because I come from a very liberal background. All my friends were much more feminist than myself, and I thought that if I started to wear hijab, they would talk me out of it in 2 hours. So when I got to London and I was alone and they're not there, these friends of mine, who later on, they did wonderful things. They became ambassadors and they did wonderful things. And so I thought I'd do this, privately on my own. And in that time, completely nothing, And no one questioned me. No one asked me. It was quite nice, to be to be in this place where it just did not have any political meaning or any, no one made assumptions about it. But then, of course, now this is whole change. Now it's a very hot topic and it's a very politicized thing. Yeah.
Okay, let me. I was going to go into language and writing in Africa generally, but I want to ask you a personal question, which is the role of writers in the face of oppression. Mm-hmm. So, we, of course, you are familiar with the crisis about, surrounding your invitation to the festival and all about, you're a writer, there is a crisis situation, a perception of oppression in some place. What do you think is the role of a writer? But more importantly, what do you think is the role of a Muslim? So, for instance, in the particular case of Kaduna and the crisis of the Shiites that were killed in 2015, the Shiites are Muslims, and of course, I'm also object to the idea of calling them Shiites rather than Nigerian and citizens who happened to believe in a certain, dimension of Islam. So, what do you think is the role of writers? What's the role of a Muslim? And how does jihad, as a personal struggle, as a Muslim living in a situation where there's political oppression, political victimization, how do you think they should respond?
Well, I think this is a very individual thing. I think everyone has to make their own, they have to strike their own path. They have to be sincere to themselves. They have to be, true to their own values and not be hypocritical. And also they have to be mature in that they take on battles they can win. There's no point in entering a battle where you're going to lose. There's no courage in that. The courage is that you choose your battles and you choose, you gauge your strength properly and see what you can take on and what you can't take on. And I think a lot of young people, maybe they make this mistake, that they throw themselves into fights which they are not only defeated, but they are burnt out, and then they cannot go on to fight another fight. So everybody needs to know themselves and know what they can take on and what they can't take on. And if you overestimate yourself or underestimate yourself, you're still making a mistake either way.
Yeah, what I'm trying to...
diplomatic answer.
Yeah, quite. But I'm not letting you off. What I'm trying to find out precisely is, jihad is still applicable to a struggle within the faith itself, isn't it? That's what I'm trying to confirm. I mean, I understand the idea of struggle against societal issues, struggle sometimes against an oppressing force sometimes, but it's applicable, right? Even
yes,
among
I mean,
the
imams who are fighting Boko Haram, they are the ones making jihad. This is the true jihad, that they're fighting for the safety of their people, and they're fighting against the perversion of the faith. So this is the jihad, and we have to support them, as much as we can. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's go to more fun stuff. Have you written in Arabic?
No, I haven't written in Arabic because my education was always in English. So English, is my stronger language. Although I read and I understand and I speak Arabic fluently. But when it comes to the writing, I would always write in English because it's a stronger language for me. Yeah.
Okay. Has your work been translated into Arabic?
Yes, and when it is, I work closely with my Arabic translators because I know the two languages, and I care very much about what the Arabic reader thinks of my work. So it's quite hard, time-consuming to go over every single, word. Yeah.
Okay. Your work has been translated into 14 languages, I'm told. In which language has it been best received?
Well, I'm waiting for the Hausa translation, which...
Yeah.
I met my Hausa translator on...
Oh, you already have one?
Yes, and on the opening ceremony. And so, inshallah, this will be the one that's best received.
Okay. In the novel, The Kindness of Enemies, who was your most challenging character to write?
I think it was Natasha herself, because she's very different than me, very, very different. So I'm writing about someone whose life is very different, whose attitude is very different. So that was quite hard. And writing in the first person.
Yeah.
And so some of the criticism I got was that she's a cold character, or she's not a nice character, and all that. And it was maybe because I couldn't I couldn't relate to her as much as I wanted to. Yeah.
But there were some similarities as well. She was born in Sudan, I think, and then moved to the UK, and you had a similar experience?
A little bit similar, but she moved at a very young age, and I moved in my mid-20s, so I had, I was quite immersed in the life in Sudan.
Okay. Something else I've noticed and I've read about your work is the idea of always looking for spiritual enlightenment from the characters. At the end of this, Natasha and Malak, I think they both started looking, going to the mosque and following religion, trying to understand more about Sufism and all of that. Have you always wanted characters to do that, and how have they been accepted by the society, by the people who you've been writing for?
Well, I think that the spiritual side of Sudan, of Islam, the Sufism, is the one that has really stood the test of time. And actually, the modernist political Islam, it has now reached a dead end. It has brought us, radicalism. It has just not achieved what it set out. This idea of modernizing, and it has failed. And it's actually now the traditional, Sufism, who focused on the worship and said, leave the politicians to do what they want. Let's focus on the worship. Yeah. This is the one that has stood the test of time, and this is the one that has to me, integrity. Yeah. Because they haven't then switched. They haven't then played with democracy and played with voters and played with this and played with made money through this kind of banking or that. They've kept themselves, the Sufi sheikhs, they've kept themselves quiet and detached. And this is a good thing, I think, and this is where the strength comes from.
Thank you. I'll let you read excerpts from the book.
Okay.
And if we have some time, we'll take a few more questions before we throw it to the audience.
All right. Okay.
You can tell us a little bit about what part you're reading, and so that it gives people an idea. I hope many people here have already bought the book. If you haven't, I think they're at the bookstore, right? Yes, you can get them there.
Well, I thought I'd give a flavor of both sides, the present and the past. So would you like me to start with the present or the past? Which would you prefer? The past.
The past.
Okay, we'll start with the past. Okay, in the past here, Anna, the princess who's been kidnapped, she's staying in with the wives of Shamil. We've got a polygamous situation here again. And she's been told by one of the younger wives, who's a friend of hers, Amina. Amina says to her, come and let me show you something special. She's taking her to see the Shamil's quarters. They walked through the gallery to the building which housed Shamil's quarters. Anna began to feel weary, even though she knew he was away. Curiosity kept her from turning around. Amina pushed open a door, and they were in Shamil's room. In the dim light, Anna smelled cloves or camphor. When her eyes adjusted, she saw, hanging over the fireplace, a scimitar, a sword, and some pistols. The pistols were Georgian, mounted in silver. The sword had an Ottoman cartouche, and there was gold Arabic calligraphy inscribed on the blade. The hilt was of animal horn, and there were vegetal decorations on the crossbar. The walls of the room were simple white, and there were a few Caucasian rugs on the floor, a wooden trunk pushed against the wall, a copper basin and jug. What surprised Anna most were the books, manuscripts, and journals lined the shelves of more than one wall. There was a stack of the St. Petersburg paper, the Ruski Invalid. It was a simple room, no opulent chair, no desk, no clocks or cigar boxes, no globes, and no decoration. And yet she wanted to linger, to absorb the solemn atmosphere, the stillness that almost had a color. She looked more closely at the books, their Arabic script, a stack of ledgers full of accounts. Amina moved towards the trunk and said, "Come and see his clothes." Anna shook her head, but Amina had already lifted the lid of the trunk open. Anna looked down at green and brown woolen cloaks folded neatly, the heavy twisted white that made up his turban. She flushed because she was snooping, and she should not be. She had told him that first time, "My rank and upbringing forbid me to lie. I will not trick you." Amina was naive to bring her here. Perhaps she would be punished for it. The next day, Chouinette, who was another wife, gave birth to a girl. She lay propped up on cushions, dark shadows under her eyes, but smiling, the baby swaddled in her arms. Her room filled up with women, and a tray of rubbery Turkish delight was passed around. The celebration would have been bigger had it been a boy. "We are waiting for her father to name her," Chouinette smiled. "I have already sent a message to him. Would you like to hold her, Anna?" She could not refuse, though it brought back gusts of disbelief, one battering memory after the other. She had crooked her arm in exactly the same way, made sure Lydia's head was supported, felt her own body large in comparison, a bulwark against harm. All babies were alike, but not identical. There was the delicate skin, dewy, sometimes flaky, hair on the arms like threads. There were the exquisite movements, the slight toss of the head, mouth open, rooting for milk, a yawn, a push of the elbow, a drawing in of the knee, these exact same movements the mother had felt in the womb. And then there were their eyes, large and steady, because they held knowledge of other worlds. Later, in a few years' time, they would carry names that defined them. They would find out on which side of the war they belonged. Later, they would learn the legends and the proverbs, hear them from an older cousin or a younger aunt. When will blood stop flowing on the mountains? When the sugarcane grows in snow? But not yet. In these early days of their life, they were above it all, pure and holy. And then the other section, which is from the present.
Yes.
Okay, so this was chosen by Kola himself. This happens when Natasha is the narrator, and she is visiting this family, which includes the young man. His name is Oz. His real name is Osama, but he calls himself Oz because of obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And then, so this is the time that he gets arrested. So it's very early in the morning, and Natasha and Malak are in the kitchen. So she says, "I looked up and through the window saw two policemen. Before I could tell Malak, they rang the bell. She went to answer it, and then everything happened very fast. One of them speaks and says the other name instead of Oz. His voice is loud, says they have a warrant for his arrest. Malak asks why, and the answer starts with T, ends with a suffix, and she draws in her breath. I am glued to the kitchen floor, mobile phone in my hand. They are everywhere now, lots of them, not two, with their shoes stomping. But Malak doesn't say, 'Take your shoes off.' They leap up the stairs. I catch a blur of dark uniform, footsteps above me. Malak is calling Oz. This makes them angry. They think she's warning him off, and two of them run, banging the bedroom door open. I hear him say, 'What the fuck?' I hear a scuffle, but then Malak's voice telling him to be calm, to best do as he's told. I walk to the landing, but one of them is holding the sword in his hand. The sitting room is in disarray. One of them comes up to me. His large face looms close. He carries two laptops, mine and Oz's. The white one is mine, I say, but he takes my mobile too. His voice is loud, but he just wants my name and my address. I tell him why I am here, but still my laptop gets carried into the car. They clamber down the stairs, Oz in handcuffs, Malak following. Ozif is wearing his coat over his pajamas. His lips are dry, and his eyes, his body, the tilt of his head is rigid with anger. Anger, a crust pressing down fear. Before they prod him out of the house, he looks at me, and I have nothing to say.
Thank you. I like the second reading. I like that part, particularly for a number of reasons. Reading it, you get the breathlessness of the situation. You understand that something, a scuffle is happening. The police had come. And the way you also restrain yourself from mentioning terrorism, you describe it without mentioning it. How, they called him Osama without you saying that that's what they called him. And that happened again earlier in the first chapter as well. Yes, I just love that. Why did you think, where did the style, why did you think of the idea of writing in that way? The idea of writing, the T and the ism, and...
I don't know. I myself, I'm
it's a very effective, yeah, but it's a very effective way to let us know the gravity of the situation he was in, by letting us understand that saying it, not saying it brings a lot of gravity to the fore without, hearing it directly from you. I like that.
Thank you.
Let me ask you what the role of prizes are in the life of a writer. You won the King Prize, and every time they mention you, the first thing they mention is the first winner of the King Prize. What do you think of prizes generally?
Well, I think that the prizes are very important because they really do bring a writer to attention. And, you've seen it happening. I saw it in myself. I see it with other writers. And they're very effective. They're very good. They're almost too good now to the extent that the disappointment that the writers feel when they don't win the prize become very acute. And it can be humiliating that we're, as writers, we're competing against each other, for a prize and so on. At the end of the day, when I feel when a writer doesn't win a prize, I always say to them, it's an end to a means. The prize is a means to an end. Sorry, it is a means to an end. What we really want is readers. So if there's other ways of finding readers, of other ways of reaching readers, then we won't need these prizes. But they do play a part, and I do support them, especially for the younger writers who are starting out. Yeah.
What was it like? How did you find out about the King Prize? New Prize just started, and you had just written something, I think it was the museum, yeah?
Yeah.
And how did you come across the prize at the time? What was it like? Because now it's really competitive. Every year there's a big hoopla about the King Prize and stuff.
Yeah, of course, back in 2000, there wasn't the social media, there wasn't all this attention. And certainly when the shortlist was published, there was just no attention at all. And but then after I won, there started to be lots of interviews and lots of attention. And I had previously been published by a university press, a small publisher. But after winning the Cain Prize, I was able to move to a London publisher with my novel Minaret, and that, of course, made a big difference. Yeah.
Do you think we have enough prizes for writing on the continent?
No, we need a Man-African prize for novels, because the Cain Prize focuses on the short story. And there's a Man-Asian prize, there's, the Man Booker prize, and I think it would be good to have a
prize for novels.
A prize for novels, yeah. There's a lot of novels now coming out, and it would be good to have a prize that focuses for novels. And not only first-time novels, because Ittisalat does the prize for novels, but it's only for first-time writers, yeah.
Are there enough avenues to read works by Muslim writers or writers, Arab African writing? Because when I was writing on Twitter a couple of days before you arrived, I was saying that you were the first and only at the time, only Sudanese writer to have won the Cain Prize, and then of course the current winner. Maybe they were reading my tweets.
That's right. Yes.
He's also a Sudanese.
Yeah.
Are there more places to see to read about to read this perspective?
Well, Bush al-Fadl, who just won the Cain Prize now, he writes in Arabic, and most Sudanese writers write in Arabic, and so they then feel that they are part of Arabic literature, and which is true, and they submit their work to prizes that are for Arab literature.
Okay.
Yeah, and
are there many prizes of that?
There's one. There's the same people who do the Man Man Booker and the Man Asian. They also have one, which is the International Prize for Arab Literature.
Okay.
And there's been a number of Sudanese writers who are, being longlisted and shortlisted over time. One of them, Amir Taj-Sir, for example, with the Grub Hunters. He writes in Arabic. When it was translated, it was published by Heinemann African Writers. It's a very good novel. Yeah.
Okay. So the state of writing on the continent, what do you think? And what kind of stories would you like to read more of?
Well, it's not what I want to hear. I'm struggling to catch up now. There's a lot. There's a lot. It's fantastic. It's growing and growing, and it's wonderful to have so many writers that are writing. Yeah.
I don't know a lot about the Arab novel on the continent. I mean, I was talking with someone about what particular questions would you be in a position to answer, and we were discussing about Things Fall Apart being always referenced as the first major African novel. And it's likely that Arab Africa has a history of literature as well before Things Fall Apart. I don't know if that's the case or whether you know how you situate that as part of the African canon of writing.
I'm not sure of the timeline really for the first novel, but the Arabian poetry is old, is ancient. I mean, they've been telling poems for a long, long time, and the novel was a new thing that came, with exposure to Europe, and so it really came on, maybe in the 20th century that the Arabs started to take on the novel form. But before that, they distinguished themselves as poets. And I'm not sure then in terms of time whether Chinua Achebe, for example, is not Things Fall Apart was first, or whether the novel Zainab, I think, is the first novel in Egypt, at least, that was written. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let some other people in the audience ask questions. I still have a couple. If we have some time, I'll get back to them. So. Okay, let's start with Kadria, and there's a lady at the back in the burqa, and him, and then you. The four of them, and then you answer, and then we'll go this way.
Hi, okay, so my question is about uncomfortable places. As Muslims facing terrorism, where we are mostly the victims of terrorism, but we are often expected to also take the brunt of the impact of the backlash for terrorism. We also find ourselves sometimes examining our faith. We're being forced to question whether there's something in what we practice that is actually encouraging, terrorism. And I'm just wondering, as a Muslim writer, whether that, when you write, particularly because you're talking about people who've used jihad in the past to resist oppression, whether that conflict manifests in you, and whether you translate it sometimes into your work. So that's my first question. And the second question, the Sudan seems to have a tradition of religion as a resistance, because we have also the Mahdi, the history of the Mahdi fighting the British. And I'm just wondering, how does that manifest in present-day Sudan, which had Hassan al-Turabi's? And is religion still a very potent force? And is it, seen as something that can be used to resist politics of imperialism and things like that? Yeah.
Thank you. Do you want to? Yes. The lady in the book at the back.
Good evening. I need to repeat my name because the governor is here. My name is Hussein Asfian Ahmed. My question is relating to the Freudian psychoanalytic model. There is what we call IED in quotes. Ma'am, Leila, whenever you are writing, okay, your advice to me as a daughter and a budding writer, whenever I'm writing, am I to write directly what comes to my unconscious impulsive components, that's the id, or am I to write and keep aside the societal norms and religious norms. And what I mean is, am I to write directly what comes to my head, or am I to write and check the rules and regulations in my religion and culture? Which one am I supposed to choose? Being direct or being compromising my thoughts based on culture and religion?
Thank you. Yes. Okay. After him, you.
Okay.
Make it fast, please.
Yes, sir. My question is this. Actually, you understand that the debate of language in the discourse of African literature has been overemphasized. But, however, the question I have for Laila here is, don't you share in the conception of composing a literature in a language that actually do not talk about your people, but ultimately speak to them?
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
You're saying, would she choose to speak to the people rather than speak about them? Or speak about people rather than speak to them? Yeah, I just want to confirm what you said.
Okay, the question is this. Yeah, I said, don't you share in the conception of composing a literature in a language, perhaps maybe Arabic, you get, not English, not necessarily English. You know?
So your question is about why she's not writing in Arabic?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's the next one. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Abubakar Suleiman Muhammad. And
One house, please.
I'm going to take you a bit back to our
Please make it fast. Because of time.
especially the Ken Prize winning story, the museum. At the beginning of their careers, writers tend to appear nakedly in their work. And they hate it if this is pointed out to them. And
Just make it fast.
I don't know if you have received any criticism concerning that and how you handle it. Thank you.
I didn't understand. I don't know if you got the question. Could you repeat the question in a sentence, please?
Yes, like some beginners in writing.
Yeah.
Writing.
Beginner writers. Yes.
Beginner writers. They tend to appear in their work. So, and it's they hate it if this is pointed out to them. But I don't know if you have received any criticism concerning that or observation and how you handle it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I'll answer the questions first about the writing, the young people writing, and the young lady. Why didn't you come to my creative writing workshop that I had here? I did 2 days creative writing workshop, part of the festival. And there were 25 young ladies present, and we were in the Yasmin Al-Rafai Foundation, and it was an intensive workshop that was very successful, and we spoke a lot about some of the things that you mentioned. My advice would be to it depends what you want. If you're writing nonfiction, if you're a journalist, then you need to get your facts right. You need to research. You will lose credibility if you write something that is not, as you said, part of the culture or part of what's happening in societies. You need to get your facts right. If you are writing, creatively or fiction, then you can, you have more liberty to please yourself and to write how you want to write. But in general, and that will lead me to the second answer, it's important to just write, just get it out, and then after that, you can then move on, before you publish, then you move on to the editorial stage, where you first are looking at your writing and making changes, or an editor is, hopefully you have access to an editor or another reader who can then look at your writing and give you feedback on it and says to you, if they can't understand what you mean, for example, in this paragraph, no one else will. So in that way, you're going to need to clarify, you need to add, you need to take away. And sometimes beginner writers get very hurt when someone, including myself, when someone points out the defects in their first draft. And at this stage, then, there's a kind of a distinction between the professional, the one who's going to become a professional, and the one who's going to stay as a writer who writes out of hobby and enjoyment. If you want to become a professional, then you get used to this idea of drafting and redrafting and editing your work and writing again and again and taking on board the suggestions of the editor. Or if you're writing a screenplay, or you make sure that your story line is fulfilling, and so on. But if you don't take that path, then you don't want to keep fixing your work and keep enhancing it, then and you resent the rewriting, then then maybe you're not going to be. It's going to be difficult then to become a professional writer who deals with editors. At the same time, you have to choose the editors whom you trust. You don't want, because of course somebody who you don't trust or who's not on the same wavelength as you, or they don't understand where you're coming from, what you're saying, they could completely ruin you by giving you the wrong advice. So you really need to be to feel that you're in safe hands with your manuscript and that you've given it to somebody in safe hands. Yeah.
Language?
Language. My mother tongue is colloquial Egyptian Arabic, because that's what my mother spoke. Usually the Arabic literature is classical Arabic, so in a way you really have to, every Arab is not really writing in their mother tongue, although nowadays there is a movement by young people to incorporate colloquial, spoken Arabic into the work. I don't really have a choice. My Arabic is not strong enough to write as well as my English. I can read, I can speak, but it doesn't have that strength. So I would be. That's why I make such an effort to reach the Sudanese reader, as you were saying, with the translated work. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes. Your question.
Adria.
Yes. Okay. I think what you said is very deep and very interesting and needs a lot of exploration. I'm not going to I probably won't give your questions justice. But yes, the faith had given, or Islam has helped us resist colonialism. We've resisted the missionary activity, for example. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here today. We would have. We would not have survived colonialism as Muslims in a way. So there has been a resistance, and there needs to be a resistance, but there needs to be, which is not specifically against the West, but against maybe atheism. That we need to resist that as individuals. Your question about Sudan and the politics in Sudan, again, this is mixed. Different people will say different things. Some people are quite, happy with the way the country has become more Islamatized with time. A lot of people themselves have gone to Saudi Arabia and become influenced by, the Gulf countries in Saudi Arabia. They've become influenced by the Islamic practice there. They come back to. We feel now in Sudan that there is a greater influence of. We have women wearing the Saudi Arabian dress, for example, and not the colorful Tob Sudanese national dress, which is similar to what women in Nigeria were wearing. They've now switched to this black the abaya, which comes from Saudi Arabia. So we see these influences happen. And again, you have some people who support it, and then you have some people who don't support it. And it's a mixed bag. It's not a cut picture. I myself, I still I tend towards the traditional the Islam of
You have to be fast. So I'll take you, and you, and yeah, you. Sorry. You can always ask her questions after the events.
Thank you. The name is Sada Malumfashi. My question specifically is about your short stories. In your earlier story, The Ostrich, you have the character going from Sudan to London, and there's a struggle of adaptation and identity back then. Then in your recent story in the Transition Jalada Fair issue, you have a woman with her young daughter coming from London back to Egypt this time around, and she's struggling to adapt. Even in London, after spending much years there, she's still struggling to adapt. So,
okay. No, not you. It was him, please. Sorry. It's him. Sorry. You can still ask her questions out when the event is over.
Good evening, all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Make it fast, please. Make it fast.
Yeah, the title, The Kindness of
Enemies.
What I'm asking is that, did you decide the title before writing the book?
Good question.
Yeah, then the second question, sorry. If you had to write this, maybe do you feel like you can write this book again? Or if yes, you feel like to write this book? Question.
Are there any changes you want?
What are those things that you can change in those books? That's that.
Thank you. Where's the gentleman? Yes, please. Him. It's the last one.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
What's the question, please?
My name is Usman Sanusi. So my question seems like a comment, despite that I'm yet to read your book, but you give me more tips to go and read. So far, I want you, please, if you want to write next, to write something that is related to Africans, especially to believers of religions, that we should learn, the nature
the book
of
is about
tolerance.
African.
Yes, that's very good. Yes, this nice observation.
Okay.
Because if you look at Africa, religions and cultural things, dominate
the
region.
Thank you.
And there is need for writers to, write something that is very good. Thank you so much. And then...
No. Enough. We don't have time. Thank you. The book is I have to read. Good evening, Leila. It says, have you ever been challenged as a terrorist for being a Muslim? It's probably something that happens in the West. Have you ever been challenged as a terrorist?
No, I haven't.
Okay,
no.
Perfect. So you can answer the other questions.
Yeah.
And then.
The one about the title, this part I read out, when the sugarcane, when will the blood stop flowing down the mountains when the sugarcane turns to snow, when the sugarcane grows in snow. My original title was When the Sugarcane Grows. And then the publishers felt that if the title has the sugarcane in it, people will think it's about some tropical place. So then they suggested the change to the kindness of enemies. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And the one about the two stories, I actually wrote them at the same time, The Ostrich, and even though this one is just published now in Jalada, but it never got published all these years. It's an old story, and right now it's in the brand new edition of Jalada magazine. So thank you very much for all your questions, and
thank you everybody for your. You can ask questions when you see them at lunch or anywhere else.
Photographs, please. Let's give a very warm round of applause to Kola Tobosu for hosting this event. Isn't he just brilliant? So I know that my Oga is here. Your Excellency, welcome to... Okay. So, I'm sorry. Okay, so we have the last session coming up, and I think we should take like a 15-minute break, yeah? We take a 15-minute break, and then we come back. Please, I'm really serious this time. If you leave a book on one of these seats, it won't be there when you come back. I'm going to take it to my library, my own. Okay? Thank you very much. See you in 15 minutes. you.